When police arrived, they found him slumped over the kitchen sink. His throat slit so deep it nearly severed his head. A butcher knife was on the floor. And beside it, kneeling in a pool of blood, was his wife, her hands trembling, her face blank, whispering, "She was just a child. My child." But that was only the beginning. Welcome to Through Crime, your portal into the most chilling true crime cases, unsolved mysteries, and the darkest corners of criminal history. Please don't forget to like, share, and comment on this video. And if you are new to this channel, please subscribe. We dig deep into the facts, uncover shocking twists, and explore the theories that keep investigators and the world on edge. For 10 years, Melissa and Aaron Whitaker were the kind of couple people envied. Living in a quiet Virginia suburb, they had the big house, 2 successful careers, no debt, and a love that seemed, at least on the outside, unshakable. The only thing they didn't have was a child. After years of fertility treatments, miscarriages, and silent heartbreak, Melissa accepted the void. But life had other plans. When her younger sister died in a car crash, leaving behind a 15-year-old daughter named Jasmine, Melissa stepped up. She brought the girl into her home, her world, her heart. It was supposed to be a new beginning for them both. But it became something far darker. At first, Jasmine was quiet, withdrawn, traumatized. Melissa poured herself into helping the girl heal. Therapy, comfort, stability. Aaron was supportive. Or so she thought. He bought Jasmine gifts, helped with homework, took her on solo ice cream runs. At first, Melissa saw this as kindness. But over time, something about the way he looked at Jasmine made her stomach twist. A little too long. A little too soft. A little too possessive. She brushed it off, blaming grief, stress, paranoia. Until Jasmine stopped talking. Stopped smiling. Until Melissa found blood in the bathroom sink one night. Jasmine said it was nothing. She swore she fell. But her eyes told a different story. The truth came out in pieces. A missed period. A pregnancy test. And a name written in a trembling voice. Aaron. Melissa's world collapsed in one violent, soundless crash. Aaron denied it, of course. Told Melissa that Jasmine was confused. That she was acting out. But the look in Jasmine's eyes said it all. She wasn't confused. She was destroyed. Melissa didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply waited until Aaron fell asleep that night. Then she walked into the kitchen, pulled the butcher knife from the block, and slit his throat open while he slept on the couch. The blood splattered across the beige pillows like an abstract painting. And Melissa didn't stop until the knife snapped. When police arrived, she confessed immediately. Said she killed her husband for what he did to Jasmine. Case closed? Not quite. Detectives were initially prepared to charge her with first-degree murder. But something wasn't adding up. Aaron's phone was missing. His laptop had been wiped clean. Jasmine was quiet, but when questioned by a child psychologist, she said one thing that changed everything. He told me, I wasn't the first. That was the crack investigators needed. They dug deeper into Aaron's past. Old employment records. School files. A sealed settlement. Turns out, 5 years ago, while working as a part-time youth soccer coach, Aaron had been accused of inappropriate behavior toward a 13-year-old player. The family settled. The girl moved away. No charges were filed. And that was just one case. 3 more surfaced from his university days. Same pattern. Same profile. Young. Vulnerable. Silenced. Aaron wasn't just a one-time abuser. He was a serial predator hiding behind charm and a clean-cut life. And Melissa? She was married to him for a decade. Friends and neighbors were stunned. They described Aaron as the nicest guy, the ideal husband, a great role model. But behind that perfect smile was a man who used kindness as camouflage. The irony? Melissa spent 10 years begging the universe for a child, only to have the man she loved steal one's innocence under her roof. She thought Jasmine was a second chance at motherhood. But Aaron saw her as prey. That wasn't love. That was monstrosity in a mask. The prosecutor hesitated. Yes, Melissa had committed murder. But the motive was clearer than daylight. Self-defense, not for her body, but for Jasmine's life, her mind, her future. After reviewing the evidence, including Jasmine's testimony and Aaron's hidden history, the DA reduced the charges to manslaughter. Melissa was sentenced to 5 years in a psychiatric facility, with early release for good behavior. Some called it justice. Others called it mercy. Melissa called it freedom. Evil doesn't always break down your door with a gun or a mask. Sometimes it walks in with flowers, calls you honey, and sleeps in your bed for 10 years. Silence is the predator's favorite weapon. But truth, when finally spoken, can shatter the most well-built lies. Jasmine is now in therapy, living with relatives in another state. She's healing. Melissa? She writes letters to Jasmine every week. She calls her, my little light in the dark. 6 months after Aaron's death, a storage unit registered under a false name was discovered. Inside, a camera, dozens of tapes, and a list. At the top of the list, Jasmine, first of many, and at the bottom, another name Melissa recognized. A girl from her past. A family secret never spoken. When investigators started combing through Aaron's personal files, they uncovered a chilling series of events that went far beyond his sickening actions toward Jasmine. It started with his social media history, which had been carefully scrubbed clean before his death. But in his private messages, police discovered disturbing conversations with men he had known from his early days as a youth soccer coach. Coaches who had now gone off the radar. That wasn't the worst part. As the investigators dug deeper, they found unsettling connections between Aaron and several high-ranking community figures who had either been implicated in previous child abuse cases or had strong ties to covering them up. It was all connected. The whispers of a powerful, silent network had been building, but Aaron was merely one cog in a far larger machine. But the most shocking revelation came when the authorities finally received a search warrant for Aaron's private storage unit. Inside, the detectives found more than just the incriminating tapes. There was also a collection of photos, old documents, and a journal. The journal wasn't filled with simple accounts of his life. It was a detailed log of victims. Each entry had a name, a date, and a status update. The list spanned over a decade, beginning with girls Aaron had mentored during his coaching years. There was a name Melissa recognized immediately, Samantha Rhodes. Samantha had been Melissa's best friend growing up. They had spent summers together, lived in the same small town, and even shared secrets no one else could understand. But then, at the age of 14, Samantha just disappeared. Melissa had always thought she was just another troubled teen. She never knew the truth. Aaron had been part of the reason Samantha was gone. He had been the one who had groomed her. Melissa's shock and disbelief were overwhelming when she realized that her own father, who had died when she was young, had been complicit. She had always wondered why Samantha never returned after that summer. Now she knew. Aaron wasn't just a predator in hiding. He was part of a system of abuse, spanning multiple states and touching families like hers in ways no one ever could have imagined. Weeks after Aaron's murder, an unexpected visitor arrived at the psychiatric facility where Melissa was being held. It was a woman who identified herself as Tina Waters, a private investigator hired by an anonymous source to uncover the truth about Aaron Whitaker's past. Tina handed Melissa a sealed envelope and said, "You deserve to know the truth." Inside the envelope was a collection of photographs. One photo was particularly haunting, a photo of Melissa herself as a teenager, standing next to Aaron at a family picnic. But in the background of the picture, there was something more disturbing. A young girl, barely 12 years old, hiding behind a tree, her face blurred. Tina explained. That girl was Samantha Rhodes. Melissa was stunned. The connection she had never made was now painfully clear. Aaron had kept close tabs on her too. Had he been watching her all these years? And had she truly been the first? The beginning of a long trail of victims Aaron had left behind? Melissa had always believed her husband was the man who saved her from loneliness. He was the perfect husband, the man who held her hand through everything. But the lies she now uncovered shattered her world. Her father, her husband, both had participated in a sickening game of power, manipulation, and abuse. Tina, the investigator, offered to help. She wanted to expose the network that had supported Aaron's actions for so long. But Melissa had lost faith in everyone. The betrayal cut so deep that the thought of fighting this war felt like a betrayal to her own sanity. What had she spent all those years living for? How could she possibly trust anyone again? The more Melissa learned about Aaron's past, the more she realized that his abuse wasn't isolated. He had used his position of power, whether as a coach, a family man, or a community leader, to trap young girls in his web. But the real question loomed. Who else had been complicit? Who else knew the truth and chose to turn a blind eye? The authorities were now expanding their investigation into Aaron's network, looking into his connections with several influential figures in local government. But each lead that was pursued seemed to reveal even more sinister layers. One name kept popping up in the background, someone who had been close to both Aaron and Melissa's father. Lori Dunham, an influential woman who had worked with underprivileged youth programs, was somehow connected to Aaron's activities, acting as a bridge between his mentoring efforts and the powerful people who were willing to protect him. The investigators soon learned that Lori had been the one to arrange for Aaron's involvement in several programs, but her connection to the dark side of his life ran deeper than anyone could have predicted. Just as things began to make sense, Tina Waters, the investigator who had been helping Melissa, went missing. No one could find her. Her last known contact was a cryptic message she had sent to Melissa. The game is bigger than you think. You haven't seen the worst of it yet. But before Melissa could process the message, the door to her cell opened. It wasn't the police. It wasn't her lawyer. It was Lori Dunham, standing there with a smile that made Melissa's blood run cold. We need to talk. Melissa sat across from Lori Dunham in a cold, dimly lit interrogation room. Lori's eyes gleamed, her smile soft but predatory, like someone who knew she was about to win a battle. It made Melissa's stomach turn. I'm not here to argue, Lori said, her voice smooth and controlled. I'm here to help you understand. Understand what? Melissa's voice trembled, barely above a whisper. Lori leaned in, folding her hands in front of her. Everything. All of this, what's happening to you, to your family, has been planned for years. And I'm afraid, Melissa, it's too late to turn back. Melissa's heart raced. She had hoped for an end to this nightmare. But this was something else. Something far worse. You've been a pawn in a much bigger game, Melissa, Lori continued. Aaron wasn't just a predator. He was a tool. A way for the people in power to control you, to control everyone. Melissa's mind was reeling. She had killed Aaron. She had put him down in the worst way possible. She had thought, finally, the truth would come out and things would be set right. But now Lori was telling her that the whole story, everything, was much more complicated than she could have imagined. Lori leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing. You think Aaron was the worst of it, don't you? You think your father, the man you trusted, was the source of everything. But he wasn't. They needed Aaron for a reason, but your father was their shield. Melissa felt the world tilt beneath her feet. My father? But he's dead. He died years ago. Exactly. But before he died, your father was one of them. A part of the system. He kept the real predators safe. And when he died, they needed someone else to take his place. Take his place. Melissa whispered, her voice faltering. What are you talking about? Lori's lips curled into a knowing smile. When your father died, they needed someone with a connection to the Whitaker name, someone with trust and credibility. They didn't want to start over. They needed someone who could cover up their tracks. They needed you, Melissa. Her heart stopped. Me? What do you mean me? They knew they could control you. You were too loyal to see what they were doing. They didn't just use Aaron to hurt your niece. They used him to get to you. Melissa's breath caught in her throat. So this whole thing, this whole nightmare, was planned from the start? Lori nodded. Yes. And Aaron was just the beginning. He was never meant to be the last man you'd lose. He was just one link in the chain. After him, they would have come for your niece. And after that, maybe your daughter. Your family wasn't just a victim of Aaron's, your family was their experiment. Melissa's mind exploded with images of the past. Her father, Aaron, her life. All the pieces were clicking into place. But there was more. Always more. Suddenly something clicked. A memory flashed through her mind. Aaron had been so paranoid in the months before his death. He had started acting strange, disappearing, getting defensive. Had he known something was coming? Had he been trying to fight back against a system far more powerful than him? Why are you telling me this? Melissa choked out, her voice full of desperation. What do you want from me? Lori's smile faded and her eyes darkened. I don't want anything from you, Melissa. I'm just here to remind you that the fight isn't over. The people you thought you could trust aren't the ones who are really pulling the strings. You killed Aaron, yes. But in doing so, you started something much bigger. And I can't promise you'll survive the truth that's coming next. Melissa's mind raced. Was Lori threatening her? Or was she telling her the truth? The truth is, Lori continued, leaning in closer, you're about to learn exactly how deep this goes. You think Aaron was the end of it. You think it all ended with his throat slit. But he wasn't the end. He was just the beginning. The real people who were pulling the strings are still out there. And they're not done with you yet. The room seemed to close in on Melissa. Was she really sitting in front of someone who knew more than she did about her own life? Lori looked at her for a long moment before she spoke again. Do you want to know what's really happening? Who the people are who've been controlling your life all these years? They don't want you dead. They want you broken. They want you to lose everything and then they'll come for you again. The words hung in the air like a storm cloud, dark and heavy. Who are they? Melissa asked, her voice breaking, a cold sweat covering her palms. Lori stood up slowly, eyes locked onto Melissa's. I'll show you. But only if you're willing to face the truth. Once you know who they are, you can't go back. Just as Melissa was about to speak, the door to the room opened abruptly. A police officer stepped inside and with him an unexpected visitor. It was Jasmine. Her niece, her beautiful, precious niece, stood there, her face expressionless, her eyes cold. Melissa's heart stopped. Jasmine's presence now felt like the last nail in the coffin. She had no idea what to say. Had Jasmine been a pawn in this all along? Was she part of the game? Jasmine stepped forward, looking straight at Melissa. I know what you're thinking. But it's not over. We're just getting started. And with those words, the walls of Melissa's world began to crumble once again. The air in the interrogation room was thick with tension as Melissa stared at Jasmine. The once innocent face of her niece, her own flesh and blood, had turned into something unrecognizable. Jasmine wasn't just standing there. She was part of it, part of the system. And as she looked at her aunt with cold eyes, Melissa felt the world as she knew it completely crumble. "I know what you're thinking," Jasmine said, her voice low and even. "You think I'm just a victim. But I'm not. Not anymore. You think you were protecting me, but it's always been you who needed to be protected from the real truth." Melissa's heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about?" she whispered, the dread creeping up her spine. "I saved you. I kept you from that monster, your uncle. He hurt you. I know what he did to me," Jasmine interrupted, cutting her off sharply. "But you're still blind, Aunt Melissa. You've been blind your whole life." Melissa was speechless. How could Jasmine, her niece, be so detached? So cold? "What are you saying, Jasmine? You were just a child." Jasmine took a step forward, her gaze unflinching. "I was never a child. Not really. Not in the way you think. I've always known. You were never the one protecting me. I was protecting you." Jasmine sat down across from Melissa, her expression hardening as she spoke. The air seemed to thicken with every word. "Do you remember when I came to live with you?" Jasmine began, her voice now quieter, but every word felt like a blow to Melissa's chest. "You thought you were taking me in to give me a safe home after my parents died, but you didn't know the whole truth. You never asked the right questions." Melissa's mind raced. She had always assumed Jasmine had been the innocent victim. Her brother and his wife had tragically died in a car accident, leaving Jasmine an orphan. Melissa took her in, wanting to shield her from pain and from the darkness that had been lurking. But Jasmine's words were a revelation, an icy grip on her heart. "I wasn't just a helpless child," Jasmine continued, her voice now barely a whisper. "I had been in the system before. Before you. I had already been exposed to men like Aaron. The truth is, I knew exactly how to survive. I didn't need saving, Aunt Melissa. I needed control. I needed to make sure I wasn't the next one to disappear." Melissa recoiled, shaking her head in disbelief. "What do you mean you didn't need saving? I kept you from everything that Aaron was doing." Jasmine's eyes softened, but only for a moment. "Aaron wasn't the problem, Aunt Melissa. The problem was always you. The man who you thought was your perfect husband was just the beginning. He was a link in a chain that stretched back much farther. And you, your father, he was the one who started it all." The room grew cold as Jasmine's words sunk in. Melissa couldn't breathe. The weight of Jasmine's revelation felt like a crushing blow. She was right. She had lived her entire life thinking she was protecting her niece, keeping her from harm. But the truth was, Jasmine had been the one pulling the strings all along. "You think I was the victim?" Jasmine asked with a bitter laugh. I wasn't innocent, Aunt Melissa. I've been watching you. I've been waiting." "Waiting for what?" Melissa whispered, her voice trembling. "Waiting for the right moment. For the moment when I could expose the truth. You've been blind to everything happening around you. You didn't even see how Aaron was just a puppet for people like him." A chill ran down Melissa's spine as Jasmine's words echoed in her mind. She could hardly process what she was hearing. Had her niece really been behind all of this from the start? Had she been manipulating her from day one? The pieces of the puzzle were all coming together, but they didn't make sense. Aaron had been a monster, but Jasmine wasn't just a victim. She had been a player in this entire sick game. Jasmine's smile was cold, almost cruel as she continued. "Your father, Aunt Melissa, wasn't some innocent man. He wasn't the man you thought he was. Your father had been a part of something much bigger than you ever knew. The same people who controlled Aaron controlled him too. They were the ones who had been using you as a pawn in their game. And now they're coming for you." "What do you mean, coming for me?" Melissa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, who are these people? You've heard of the council, haven't you? Jasmine asked, her eyes now gleaming with a mixture of satisfaction and menace. The group your father was a part of? The ones who set up Aaron to be their tool? They were never finished. They had plans for you. Plans for both of us. Plans? Melissa gasped. What plans? What the hell are you talking about? Jasmine stood up, her posture confident and eerily composed. You weren't the only one who had something to lose in all of this, Aunt Melissa. But it's too late. The game's already begun. With that, Jasmine turned and walked out of the room, leaving Melissa in stunned silence. As Melissa sat in the darkness of the interrogation room, her mind racing, she could feel it. The walls closing in, the realization of how much deeper this nightmare was going. Aaron was only the tip of the iceberg. Her father's hidden life, his connections to the council, had set this all in motion. And now Jasmine, her own niece, was fully involved in a plan that stretched far beyond anyone's imagination. In the silence, a single message echoed through Melissa's mind. The game has only just begun. But who would be left standing when it finally ended? Melissa paced around the small, sterile room, her mind spinning, each thought colliding with the next. She couldn't understand what had just happened. Jasmine, her precious niece, had betrayed her in a way that she couldn't even begin to comprehend. The words Jasmine had left her with echoed in her mind. The game's just beginning. What game? Who was pulling the strings? And most importantly, what had she really been protecting her niece from all this time? She thought she had saved Jasmine from the monster that was Aaron. But Jasmine had known the real monster all along. She was part of a far more dangerous system, one that had manipulated everyone from her father to Aaron, and now, it seemed, her own niece was poised to use her as a pawn in the same twisted game. The door suddenly creaked open, interrupting her thoughts. It was a police officer, but he didn't come in alone. Behind him, a man Melissa hadn't seen in years stepped into the room. Her heart sank. It was her father's old associate, Victor Dawson. Victor had been a part of the web of deceit that surrounded her family. He was the kind of man who blended into the shadows, always there but never fully seen. And yet, Melissa had always known that he held answers her father had never given her. Now it seemed he was here to provide the answers she needed, answers she feared she might not want to hear. Victor's cold eyes met hers, and Melissa felt an eerie shiver crawl up her spine. He looked like the same man she remembered, gray hair, sharp features, and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. "I'm sure you're wondering why I'm here," Victor said, his voice low, almost too calm for the tension in the room. "Don't waste my time, Victor," Melissa spat, her anger rising. "I already know everything about your involvement with Aaron. And my father too. Just tell me what I need to know." Victor chuckled darkly, sitting down opposite her. "It's always the same with you, Melissa. You think you know the story. But the truth? Well, that's far darker than you can imagine." Melissa's stomach churned. "Get to the point." Victor leaned forward, his expression turning serious. "The people who've been pulling your strings, they're much more powerful than you think. They're not just local criminals or petty offenders. They've infiltrated every layer of society. Your father was part of a vast network, one that has been in place for decades." Melissa's mind raced. "You're talking about the council, aren't you?" Victor nodded. "Yes. But it's more than just a group of powerful people. They control everything. They've been using your family as pawns in their game for years. You were never meant to live a quiet life. The only reason Aaron was ever in your life was because they needed him there. And they needed you too." "But why me?" Melissa asked, her voice shaky. "What did they want from me?" Victor's lips curled into a sinister smile. "They wanted control. And you were the perfect candidate. Your family had always been a part of the system, but they needed to groom someone. Someone from the outside, someone who had access to everything. You didn't just marry Aaron. You became a tool for them to manipulate. And Jasmine, well, she's always known her role. Melissa's head swirled with confusion and disbelief. Was this what her life had been? Was everything she had known a lie? Melissa's thoughts were interrupted when Victor stood, his voice colder now. You need to understand, Melissa. Jasmine isn't just playing a role. She is the role. She's been the one orchestrating everything. She was the one who seduced Aaron, not the other way around. She knew exactly what she was doing. And now that Aaron is gone, she's already preparing for her next move. A chill ran down Melissa's spine. She had always believed Jasmine was a victim, someone caught in the crossfire. But what if everything she knew about her niece was a lie? No, Melissa whispered. She couldn't have been part of this. She was a child. Victor's gaze hardened. She's been manipulating you just like everyone else. Don't you see? The council needed someone like her, someone who could get close to you, who could exploit your weakness. And now she's ready to take control of everything your family worked for. Melissa felt the blood drain from her face. She's the one behind it all? Victor nodded. Jasmine is no innocent girl. She's been trained for this from the moment she came into your life. The moment you took her in, you sealed your fate. And now it's too late to undo the damage. Melissa's thoughts were racing, her mind in overdrive. It was all beginning to fall into place, but it didn't make sense. Jasmine, her niece, the girl she thought she was saving, had been playing her all along? Victor's cold voice broke through her thoughts. You need to stop her, Melissa. Before it's too late. I can't, Melissa said, her voice trembling. She's family. I've already lost too much. Victor's face softened, though there was no warmth in his expression. You've lost your family, Melissa. You've lost everything. And now it's time to choose a side. Just as Melissa was about to respond, the door swung open. A man she didn't recognize stepped inside, his face shadowed by a dark hood. Victor stood up abruptly. It's too late. They're here. The figure in the doorway slowly pulled back his hood, revealing a familiar face. Melissa gasped. It was her brother. He had been dead for years. The man who walked into the room was someone Melissa never thought she'd see again. Her brother Tom. Dead for years, or so she had believed. His sudden appearance was enough to make her head spin, but there was no mistaking him. Tom? Melissa gasped, her voice a whisper of disbelief. Tom's face remained unchanged, his eyes cold and distant. I'm sorry you had to find out like this, Melissa. A cold chill ran through her body. But, how? How is this possible? You died, you were gone, we buried you. Tom didn't respond immediately, but his eyes never wavered from hers. There was no warmth in them, no trace of the brother she once knew. I never died, Melissa. I've been with them all along. I've been watching you. His words hit her like a slap to the face. You were never meant to know the full truth. None of us were. But Jasmine, she's the key. She always has been. Melissa's heart raced, every nerve in her body on high alert. What are you talking about? You were part of this? All this time? Tom nodded slowly. I never wanted to be. But I had no choice. When you married Aaron, it was already set in motion. When you took Jasmine in, it sealed the deal. You were a pawn in a game much bigger than you could ever imagine. Her mind was spinning, desperately trying to piece everything together. It was as if a veil had been lifted, and the horrifying truth was crashing down on her all at once. You were never in control, Melissa, Tom said, his voice now hard. You thought you could protect Jasmine, but she's always been part of them. Part of the council. Melissa's knees buckled, and she nearly collapsed. She couldn't comprehend the weight of it all. She had spent so many years believing she was saving her family, believing she was protecting Jasmine from the very man who had tormented her. But in reality she had been a pawn, just as much a part of the twisted game as everyone else. The council, they've been watching all of us pulling strings. It was never about saving you or Jasmine. It was about control, Tom explained. Your father, Aaron, and me, we were all pawns manipulated into doing their bidding. And Jasmine, she was the one who would rise above it all. The game has always been hers to win. Melissa's breath caught in her throat. You let this happen. You let Aaron. I didn't let it happen, Tom interrupted, his voice rising in anger. I was forced into it. They had power over me, over all of us. But Jasmine, she's been the one pulling the strings. You thought you were protecting her, but she was always the one using you. She made sure you played your part. Suddenly the door opened and there she was. Jasmine. Her face was cold and emotionless, her posture tall and composed. She walked into the room as if she owned it, her eyes locking onto Melissa's with a chilling calm. Aunt Melissa, she said, her voice smooth and controlled. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. Melissa felt a surge of anger, but it was quickly replaced by a feeling of dread. The girl she had once tried to protect, the girl she thought she had saved, was not the innocent child she had believed her to be. She was something far darker. You, Melissa said, her voice trembling. You manipulated me. You let me believe you were the victim. All this time you were playing me, weren't you? Jasmine didn't flinch. It wasn't personal, Aunt Melissa. It was just business. The council had plans for all of us. You were simply a means to an end. You never had control of this situation, not once. Melissa's mind reeled. Her entire life, her entire existence had been built on a lie. The things she thought she had done for her family, her love for her niece, her protection of Jasmine, had all been part of a twisted, manipulative scheme. You used me, Melissa whispered, the pain in her voice raw. You used me to get what you wanted. And I killed Aaron because I thought I was saving you. Jasmine's eyes softened for a moment, but only for a moment. You were saving me, but you were also clearing the path for me. You didn't know it, but you were helping me all along. This was my plan, Aunt Melissa. I'm sorry you couldn't see that. Melissa could feel the walls closing in. Jasmine had orchestrated everything from the very beginning. Aaron's death, her niece's pregnancy, everything had been part of a twisted game, and Melissa had been nothing more than a pawn. But the most devastating blow came next. Jasmine stepped closer to her aunt, her gaze piercing. It's over now, Aunt Melissa. You've played your part, but the council has no more use for you. What are you going to do to me? Melissa asked, her voice trembling. Jasmine didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned to Victor, who had been silently watching from the corner. He stepped forward, a small, almost imperceptible nod to Jasmine. The game was finally over for Melissa. You don't need to worry about anything anymore, Victor said, his voice cold. Your fate was sealed the moment you killed Aaron. But now, it's Jasmine's turn to take the throne. She's the one who will lead the council. She's the one who will control everything. Melissa's heart sank. She realized too late that Jasmine wasn't just the manipulator of the situation. She was the one who would reign over it all. The destruction of her family had been part of Jasmine's ascension. Melissa stood in the dimly lit room, her body trembling. Her mind was broken, the weight of the truth too much to bear. You were never a victim, Melissa whispered, her voice cracking. You were always the enemy. Jasmine looked at her with an icy smile. I was never the enemy, Aunt Melissa. I was always the victor. With that, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving Melissa standing alone, surrounded by the wreckage of everything she had believed in. The last thing Melissa heard before the door slammed shut was Jasmine's voice, faint but unmistakable. "The game is over, Aunt Melissa. And I've won." In the end, Melissa was nothing more than a casualty of a game that was never hers to play. Jasmine, her own niece, had played her like a puppet, using her love and trust to advance a dark, twisted agenda. But as the dust settled and the truth finally came to light, one thing was clear. No one walks away unscathed from the game of power, betrayal, and manipulation. And some games are never truly over. Stay tuned for more true crime stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for updates on our next chilling case.